Welcome to Power Up Your Practice, the go-to podcast for law firm owners and managing attorneys working on the business, not in it. I'm Ruby Powers, your guide into the heart of law practice management, bringing you insights from leading legal minds, trailblazing attorneys, and expert guests who provide you with an actionable perspective on running your firm more effectively and efficiently. Prepare to open your mind, be inspired, and power up your practice to the next level. Hi, everyone. My name is Ruby Powers, and I'm your host and companion through this ever-evolving landscape of law practice management. Thanks so much for joining us. And just like we said, each episode we get to hear about our guests' superpowers and their perspectives on reaching success. And we have an expert today, and Audrey Johnson. I'm super excited to have her. We have known each other for a handful of years, and she is a certified family business specialist and financial planner. And just every time I hear her speak, I'm always taking notes and learning something. And I just think that we need, as law firm owners and business and managing attorneys, we need to sort of look at the bigger picture, because a lot of times we just so get focused on running our firms that we don't see the bigger picture. And that's why we hire experts, right? That's why people hire us. We don't know everything all the time. So Audrey, thanks so much for joining us. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me. As Ruby said, my name is Audrey Johnson. I'm a certified family business specialist, financial planner. I started my practice about 9 years ago now, going on 9 years. And I really got my certification, started working with business owners back in 2017. When my certification had ended, started, not ended, started, but I had, finished school to go ahead and get that. And, what really inspired me to work with business owners is my family actually owned a privately held company, family-owned business when I was younger. And there were just so many things that had happened that were either mismanaged or just they did not seek industry professionals, the advice of those people that could have really helped the business succeed. So when I learned about, the CFBS program and how I could really be a resource to help business owners, that's really where I focus and what I want to help my business owners not just survive, but thrive through their business, right? And so, I work with all types of businesses. I actually work with a ton of law firms. I think business owners are so busy working in their business, they don't have enough time to work on their business. So that's part of my job, is to kind of help take a step back, look at, what's going on from a macro level. How can we make small adjustments for big overall impact in their business over time, and just make sure whatever they want to have happen happens. Whether, that's selling to private equity or passing it down to a loved one or key employees, or just retiring and sailing off in the sunset, and I don't care what happens to the business, right? Just helping them make sure their dreams come true.
Okay, so that's a lot to unpack, because sometimes I think we get confused between, a financial planner and a CPA, and then there's like bookkeeper, but we know that's a little bit different. And then what are and I get what you're saying, and I know what you do, but what is the value what are the actual specific things a financial planner and the value they can bring? What are some of the things that a lot of law firm owners or business owners are just completely not thinking about that you can bring to the table, or if we were to find a financial planner for ourselves?
Yeah. And, I think there's all different types of financial planners, financial advisors, wealth managers, right? There's a lot of different titles, and actually they all mean very different things. So when we talk about financial planning, what that means is actually going through a full plan where we're gathering all your documents, in the business personally, just taking a really deep dive, putting your information in the financial planning software and making specific recommendations to you, your business, on how to improve, whether that's, tax-wise, improve employee benefits, increase wealth in the business. And so that's really what I do. And my specialty is really building that plan and taking a deep dive with these business owners and whatever they really want to focus on, or what else we see that can improve efficiencies in the business, right? You see wealth managers or financial advisors, and I think a lot of people have this stigma, they're just trying to gather as many assets as possible and put them in the market, and that, I'm happy to help facilitate that and, help people invest in the market. But if they want to go buy a property or invest more in their business, helping them really just figure out how to navigate that and what is going to be the best plan and best arena there. I think another thing people don't realize, what financial planners do, or like a lot what I help with, is actually tax strategies outside of what CPA. So I'm not a CPA. I have my own CPA. I love CPAs, and I do have to work with all of my clients' CPAs, right? But I think a lot of just people think their CPA should be giving them tax advice when really that's actually a separate service from tax filing.
I'm really guilty of this. I'm like, why aren't they telling me more? Like, why are you making me pay all this? No, like, if I would have known how, yes, that's really, I'm glad that you're explaining this, because I think even though a lot of us have businesses for a while, I think we sort of stumble upon the answer to these questions inadvertently, not directly. So.
Yeah, well, and I think you think CPA, you think tax, you think they should be looking through and giving you all this advice, but really what they're just trying to do is look a year in the rears and file your taxes and give you the deductions they can. But what we do is actually look a year forward. And not that CPAs can't do this, but just not all CPAs do this. Or like I said, it's a separate service that you have to pay for. But that's what we encumber in our planning, and we're one of 20 financial planning firms in the country that do the type of business and tax strategy planning that we do, where we really are looking a year forward, seeing how your money's moving. Is there a way to more efficiently do that? So I think that's what we're all looking for, is, hey, how do we reduce our taxes? How do we reduce our, our burden to the IRS? And I think a lot of people don't realize too, providing benefit to employees, like that's a benefit for the employee and employee retention, because that's like the number one cost to a business is actually employee turnover. So there's a way to take our dollars that we were going to pay in taxes anyway and give it back to the employees. There's ways to do that. That's, again, very tax efficient.
And so when you work, like, what's an ideal client in terms of like, what do you do when you meet with somebody, like, to sort of walk them through this?
Yeah, so the very first time I meet with anybody is really just to learn a little bit more about them, what they have going on personally, financially, what their goals are. And then it also kind of helps better explain the bigger areas that I work in. And what gives us a chance to meet each other, because it's not always that it's like a relationship. You know what I mean? Like maybe the business owner isn't in the right place, or maybe they don't like me. Just things happen, or we're just like not a good fit. So that first meeting is really just me asking a bazillion questions just to learn more about them and their business, and specifically their goals. That's really what I want to know about, right? Like, what are your goals? And really a lot of these questions are things that I would say most people are like, wow, I've literally never thought about that before, right? So it's just questions that I think most business owners, like, again, you're just working so much in your business, you don't think about all these other things that can really cause, like, the downfall of your business if this happens, or hey, we could really like 10x our business if we did like a few things here. You know what I mean? So again, that first meeting is really just to get an understanding of where they are, and then it's for me to ask, like, what keeps you up at night? What are your priorities? What do you want to work on? These are a few things that I see, and this is how I think we should work together moving forward if you're open to it.
And so I've heard you discuss things like disability insurance and key person insurance. Like, what is that for those listeners who might not know what that means, and what's the importance of that?
Yeah, so I like to just kind of wrap that up in bubble and just say risk management. Like, what are these things that are big risks in our business that can happen that we want to make sure we're protected for? I think like easy one everybody has, is liability insurance. That should be something you have, like liability and umbrella insurance. But on top of that, especially for business owners, typically business owners, they are the key employee of their business, right? Like if they're not there, their business is not going to continue to run. And if it's not them, it's either their business partner and them, or another key employee that really is truly running the business. So when you think about these key employees, these people who make your business run, if they don't show up tomorrow because, God forbid, got in a car accident, and maybe they're in the hospital, or they got cancer or COVID, years ago, or they passed away, something happened and they're not there anymore. It's like, number one, does anybody else know how to do their job? How much is that going to cost to replace them in the company? How much money are you going to lose in the meantime? Especially if it's, again, the business owner who's like that sole key person. Like, what's going to happen to the business? Do they have anyone to transfer it to? So when we look at things like disability insurance, key person insurance, it's just making sure that we can help fund the business to keep it alive, to make sure that again, either us as business owners can come back in the business after to make sure the lights have stayed on, all the overhead has gotten paid, or, if we passed away, is it being passed on to the successor? Is our family getting bought out of the business, right? A lot of times, we don't think about the personal side of business owners. I think sometimes at the beginning, they're struggling so much, and now we're making good money and we're doing great. But, personally, it's usually dual income household, or as a business owner, you are the sole income of the household. So if the company just conflicts tomorrow because you didn't have any protection or insurance, then, how is your family going to get bought out of the business? Are you going to have to liquid fire sale assets? It's like not ideal, So it's just, anyway, the point of this is just to make sure that you're protected if something doesn't happen. Of course, none of us plan for anything to happen. I mean, like every day I think I'm going to die on the freeway in Houston because everyone drives here like a maniac. So it's just making sure that we are protected just in case that inevitable happens, to make sure our family's protected and then our employees as well and the business.
Thanks for explaining that. And, as law firm owners in most of the states that we're practicing, with a few exceptions, non-lawyers are not allowed to own of a law firm. And then if we're, like, let's say we're married to a non-lawyer, it's like, well, what's the plan? And like you've explained to me, before, like that disability insurance, if you're temporarily disabled or whatever it may be, or if it's a key person insurance, that helps cover the firm or the business during that time to help, prepare for a sale if it's not ready, and pay someone to get it ready, and to sort of to prevent that fire sale. And the other thing I've learned through this journey is that ideally do get yourself quoted for disability insurance when you're healthy and not doing surgeries and things like that. And that, so early on, so that you can just get locked into a good rate. And think about the future. And I completely agree with you. Like, even if we are both of us, child of entrepreneurs and a long line or what have you, like, it doesn't mean we always see good examples. Maybe you saw really good examples, but like, I didn't see a lot of this other outside planning, from some of my family. And so learning these good habits of risk management, I think, are what we really need to do as law firm owners and managing attorneys.
I think I've had a lot of clients say, like, it really keeps me up at night. You know what I mean? Like, what would my family do? And so it's just like eliminating that of like, hey, we have a plan. You know what I mean? The other really important thing in the risk management is if you have a business partner, really writing a buy-sell agreement. I think it's so important, and like most people do not have one. And I want to say, I don't actually remember the statistic, but something like greater than 50% of them actually aren't even signed. Maybe they're still drafted by an attorney, but they're not signed. Which I like to just basically call it like a prenup for the business. You get a prenup before marriage to make sure if something happens, everything's planned out while everyone's happy with each other. Same thing with the business. Just get a buy-sell agreement in case there's a disagreement, an early departure from the business, death, disability, dismemberment, something like that. You are taken care of, and it's like a plan we already went back to, we already agreed to, and so there's no hard tensions. No one's getting screwed out of any part of their business. And again, it just protects each other, the family and the business.
So one of the other things one can do with their business is they can provide a lot more benefits to their, there's been a lot of changes in the last couple of years. I think a lot of more changes that more benefits you provide to your employees, and everything from like 401k to with 529 or just some other options. And I mean, I first got insurance for my staff like a long time ago, but I did it mostly, well, I don't want to say this out loud, but like selfishly, I was trying to recruit and retain better staff. And I realized it was a necessity to do it. But it really, I think initially I was bootstrapping a lot, my business. And then I realized this is a necessity. And so trying to add more of those benefits. But what are some of the ones that we can add to our businesses that, it's sort of like a win-win, either for tax and it's a benefit for employees?
Yeah. And, I don't think it's selfish. I think honestly, just going to give you like a good, I think most business owners like actually do it selfishly at first, because they're like, we need to retain people. Because again, that turnover is like the highest cost to a business. I don't think y'all have had much turnover, but I have some clients that it just seems like they can't keep anybody, and it's just costing them so much money every single year. So I think most people who get the insurance, it's either selfish because they need it personally, or they really are trying to retain employees. And a lot of employees are looking for those benefits: health insurance, 401k, group benefits, right? So those are all things that I help my clients with, right? Whether we're just setting up, if you don't have many employees, or it's just you setting up SEP, IRA, or simple IRAs for smaller businesses. But I think a lot of people are scared of 401ks and setting them up because it can be costly to set them up. But like you're saying, with the new tax changes and, it can be very beneficial to the business owner to set up a 401k, and it looks really attractive to employees as well, right? And then on top of that, setting up things like group life, group disability plans, things like that to help the employees get it at a discount. And sometimes the business can cover that, sometimes they can't. And then like ancillary coverage, like flat coverage, things like that is another thing that I don't personally help, but I have people and resources that I usually refer into the business, because those things are really important, and it just provides that additional benefit to the employee. A couple other things I think most people don't know about are things like, on top of your 401k, you can do profit sharing, or cash balance plans, or split funded pensions, or non-qualified deferred compensation. And I feel like I'm probably speaking Chinese to a lot of people. But what these are just additional ways to set aside money that are really beneficial for the business owner. The profit sharing, cash balance, split funded pension are all associated with the 401k, but allow us to set aside much more than that maximum 401k allowed a contribution. Again, it's a big benefit for the business owner, but it will also benefit the employees as well. Non-qualified deferred compensation can be similar to 401k, but opposite. As everyone knows, 401ks can be non-discriminatory, right? So everyone has to be involved if you work over a certain amount of hours, and yada, yada, yada. Non-qualified deferred compensation allows just a general agreement between the business owner and employee for a future payment of funds in the future. So we do arrangements like this all the time for highly compensated employees, for potential owners in the business, but it's just another way that you're able to help compensate those key employees in your business and discriminate against the rest, right? It's just an agreement between you and one employee. So that's something else that we help with on the benefit side that I think that we look at sometimes if it makes sense for the business owner, but aren't being talked about a lot.
So there's like a lot of other ways to find financing too. Like, do you guys do HELOC, or what is that?
Yeah, so I don't personally do any of the financing, HELOC, stuff like that. However, as you know, like, we try to provide a really white glove service to our clients, where we really want to be that partner helping you shop these rates, look at everything. So a HELOC, a home equity line of credit, if you want to get a line of credit, a business loan, what banks do we look at, all of that kind of stuff. We help facilitate that process, but it's not something that we do specifically. But again, those are things that we will recommend through that financial plan, or can recommend through that financial plan if we see it viable. I was just talking to a client earlier today about a HELOC, and I think a lot of people are like, why would I do that? But, for a lot of people who need investment opportunities, or want to invest in, real estate, things like that, while you don't really need it, is a good time to get these kind of things set up, right? Because when you do, typically you're a little bit more strapped, and then it's harder to get approved. Those are like little things we will look at and recommend from the financing standpoint. Again, just depending on what people's goals are and where they're at right now.
Right. It's like a line of credit. It really is basically, and I remember learning a long time ago, like, get a line of credit before you need it, just so you have it. And then just, it's like an insurance policy. Yeah, there's so many things to consider. What are and then, like, there's even these other tactics, like if your children can become employees to your business in certain circumstances, and that also helps them. And there's like everything. Anyway, how does that work?
Yeah, so all of that's part of the tax strategy, right? So, of course, there's limits to how much you can pay your kids, and they actually have to technically be working in the business in some capacity. So that's really where we'll work with our employees' CPA. But again, through that financial plan is where we make all those recommendations and strategies. And it's, again, dependent on clients. If you don't have children, you can't do that. But if you do, it's just, how do we get creative, and how do we make your money, leverage your money, and make it stretch even further, right? So if we can pay the kids through the business and then fund things for them like 529 or Roth IRAs or things like that, why not do that? It's a benefit to the business, benefit to the family. And so those are things we will help facilitate and talk to our clients about. But yeah, that's what I'm saying. There's all sorts of little strategies everywhere, especially when it comes to taxes, that people just don't know about, and they think, why didn't my CPA tell me about this? Well, again, it may not be in the engagement that you signed with your CPA, but those are definitely things that we look at and are making sure that we're really making sure to set our clients up for success, because we don't know what's ever going to happen, right? Like, our world is an ever-changing landscape. COVID happened 4 years ago. Nobody planned for that. You know what I mean? So if you did have these things like lines of credit set up, it's a lot easier to survive during that time. You know what I mean? Than not, especially if you hadn't needed them. So we just want to make sure at all times we're being as efficient as we can with our money in all aspects, and then we're also set up for success in every capacity.
Yeah, and I like having had conversations with you about these types of things. Like, there's these computer programs, whether they use your services or something else, like where you can calculate like how much you need to make by this time and what the insurance would cover or not, your retirement, and estimated time before you want to retire, and like you really can graph out a lot of different scenarios these days. And I recently recorded a succession planning with the American Bar Association, and us as attorneys, no offense to us attorneys, like, we're really bad at thinking about these things, like, and planning it out. And so that's why I like to really focus a lot about these types of topics, because I mean, having had this job for 14, no, it's not just a job, but like, the same employer for 14-ish years, what like, I'm putting a lot of eggs in this basket for retirement. My husband goes somewhere and he gets all these different packages. I don't even understand what all that stuff is, and I'm just like, just something simple. And he's employee salary plus maybe IRA or something simple or something like that for 1K. So like, what are some of like the bare minimums, if somebody's listening, they're like, I haven't really thought about this. Like, what are some of the bare minimums like people need to be doing? I know you want us to look at the whole thing, but like, maybe start baby stepping us into like what we should be doing to take care of ourselves and our businesses.
Yeah, I think just making sure, like, again, like when we're looking at risk management, I think that's kind of where it all starts, right? Like, if you don't have the right policies set up for the business and for you, just to make sure that, you, your family, the business is taken care of, I think that's a really big first step, especially if you have a business partner, don't have that buy-sell agreement. It's really important, making sure that our, cash reserves are good, right? Like, we have enough cash reserves. I think that's really important as well. And if not, setting up like a good line of credit, again, just making sure we're set up for success. So I think those are really like the very first step for people who have never done planning before, and where we kind of look to first is just, we would be horrible planners if the first thing we did was, hey, you should go invest X amount, to do this for retirement, and then they become disabled the next day and can't do that anymore, right? So it really all does start from making sure you have a solid foundation to your financial plan, to your, financial home. It's just making sure you have like that emergency savings, a line of credit, if you can get it, if you need that, good like disability, business overhead expense, key man policies. And then on top of that, we just keep building. Okay, then what are we doing for retirement? How are we doing all of this tax efficiently? Okay, after that, then we really start focusing on the stuff that's really fun, is, asset accumulation and wealth management and growing our assets. And then eventually think about succession planning, right?
And that's good segue, because I was about to ask about that. But, the other thing about knowing how much you have, so when I went through this process with you, it was like, we were like, oh, but there's that account, and then there's like that account. And then it just started adding up, like, oh. And then when you start looking at all in one big pot, you're like, oh, and then your brain starts thinking, oh, I could invest in that and I could do that. Or like you start seeing the world differently, because then you're like, you see opportunities, which I'm always seeing opportunities. It's almost like I need to stop that. But anyway, but then, you're at the right place at the right time and you jump on it. Like, I was able to buy the building that my law firm rents from. And, that's why I like also talking to you about, like, because you're a real estate investor, and, just sort of seeing those opportunities out there.
You got to be ready for them at any time, right? Like, that's the hard thing about real estate, is just like, I don't know, it's like when a good deal comes available, you have to be ready to grab it, or especially here in Houston, it's going to be gone the next day.
For sure. And if it's too good of a deal, like it's not going to be there very long, or maybe something's fishy about it. But like you've got to have enough guts to go for it and jump on it. Yeah, there's the risk factor. But so okay, a lot of times when people are talking about succession planning, like let's see, where should we go? I would say maybe something about like what are some of the factors in valuing your business? And what are some of the things, like how far off into the future do you think someone should plan for that?
Yeah, I think it's actually really surprising. We usually recommend about 10 years out from when you want to start retiring, which is crazy because you're like, a lot can happen in a decade. You know what I mean? I don't think you can ever start planning too early for your exit, even if you're planning 15, 20 years out, right? I honestly don't think that's too early because there's a lot that goes into planning for an exit, right? And the other thing too, it's like, how do you want to exit your business? Sometimes people are like, I have no idea. I just want to make sure that I'm set up for success, right? And so I want to make sure that I'm getting the highest possible multiple for my business. Okay, then we really need to focus on what factors are bringing down in the overall industry that you're in, or bringing down your valuation. But especially in family-owned businesses, I think that's another thing is, if mom and dad own the company and then brother, sister want to take over, or maybe sister does and brother doesn't or something like that. How do we pass that along to our family, but also make it fair and equitable for all the other siblings, right? Also, mom and dad have worked really hard building this business, so they want top dollar. And then the kids are like, well, you're my parents, I want a discount. You know what I mean? So it's like, how do we make that fair and have that conversation? Because it can be really difficult. So planning out really early is best, just because it gives us enough time to figure out, okay, how do we want to transition this business? Who do we want to transition it to? Is your business at the highest possible valuation that it can be at, or are there things that are missing? And that it doesn't just happen overnight. It takes years. And then typically too, while we're doing the buyout, I think a lot of people think, when I sell my business, I'm just going to get a check and go buy this red convertible and sail off into the sunset and everything's going to be beautiful and that's going to be it. Like, no, you owe a lot of taxes if you do that, right? So it's like usually there's like a slow transition out of the business too, where maybe you're not working as much, but especially if you built up a lot of goodwill, a good brand, your clients who really know you. How are you going to make that transition to the next owner while getting your distributions out of the business and not paying a buttload in taxes to the IRS as well, right? So I think a lot of people think, I'll think about it later. And it's like, no, we really should start looking at that now. And also just getting a baseline understanding of where our business is on the valuation scale. I don't do certified valuations, but I do have a couple of softwares. And if, anyone's listening to this podcast and wants to go through that process, feel free to reach out to me or Ruby and we can send that to you, or you can just get a baseline. It's not certified, but just understanding of where you are in the general market. Because I think it's good to know. I think a lot of business owners, when they go through that, they're like, what? Like, that's where what do you mean my business is there? I thought it was here. There's just some little tweaks here and there that we can really make a overall impact. But I don't know, and then, sorry, I'm kind of rambling, I feel, but there's also some business owners that just have no idea what they want to do, but I don't even think that that's a bad idea to start thinking about it. Is when we start asking these questions and exploring. And I think really when people start meeting with me is like, and they're like, I have no idea. Well, they start thinking about it, right? Like I said, I ask a lot of pointed questions on purpose to get people's mind really thinking about these sort of things. So hopefully in a year or two, they're kind of wanting to go in one direction or the other.
And the other thing that I think is important, just like a good key point, is that if you are planning for the end in mind, then you can sort of have a better control over when that's going to be. Because what we know as business owners, there's economic cycles and then these random crazy things that happen, like pandemics and whatever. And then so like we saw a lot of people during the Great Recession, like 8, 9, 10, or that they lost a lot of value of their retirement funds. Like, maybe you need to postpone a sale by a few years, and being able to not be at the mercy of just the market is really helpful. I agree with you. I've heard different things. People say only a shorter period of time, but I've also seen from things I've read and talked to people is that I think also the older we get, the less energetic we are, willing to change, and we start getting a little bit more like, well, it is what it is, and I've also heard the succession planning conversation a lot, like maybe even you've said this, but I've heard this a lot, like getting a house prepared, for sale. And, was get rid of the junk, put on some extra coat of paint, fix a couple of the money areas. And that's really could take a lot longer than you think, and you might not know until someone comes into your business and says, yeah, what? You don't have a system for that and a system for that, and you don't keep track of all your contacts in one place, and you have multiple case management softwares, and like, what's going on over here?
Yeah, another thing too, we have seen, and so we use something like that deferred compensation to keep people around longer, is if you have some key people in your business that maybe they love you, but they want to exit when you exit, but like the new business owners, assuming they're going to stay on, is like, how do we make that transition really good again? Because the new business owners aren't going to want turnover either. They're not going to want to lose these key people that have been there forever. So how do we incentivize these key people to stay, just for a few more years, and talk to them through the transition as well? Another thing too, like through when we're doing that financial planning, I think this really surprising to some people. I just recently had a client that's like, okay, if you just work actually for 2 more years, how much your net worth is going to double, right? Like they really wanted to retire at 57, but if we just push it to 60, like how much more they would have had, and it's like, you don't necessarily need to work, but maybe that's this transition period out of your business, right? But maybe we don't transition at 57, we transition at 60 or 62, or we spend this amount of years, transitioning out. So like you said, we're able to model all of that for the client, and just really, if it's the difference between, like 10 million and 13.5 million working 2 more years, someone may say, yeah, I really want to continue to work those 2 more years for 13.5 million. Let's do it. Right. But we're able to model all of that for everybody to help make those sound decisions, instead of just feeling like they're throwing a dart at the wall. Like, yeah, this is when I think I want to exit,
Right. And you calculating like when your kids are going to finish college, or, like go get full rides, and then everything will be great and we can finish early.
Perfect.
So it's been great, Audrey. I always like to ask our guests, what's your superpower, and tell us a little something about it. So I know it might not seem apropos to what we're talking about, but usually it is, surprisingly.
I would say I feel like my superpower is really being able to talk to people, and this is like professionally and personally too, right? Like talk to people with like really empathetic, understanding tone, and just making them feel really calm and secure about a situation. I've had a lot of people tell me that too, which I find kind of funny because I have like anxiety myself really bad. So I was like, wow, I can't believe I can make other people feel this way. But I think it is just because, I think a lot about myself as like almost a therapist, right? I had actually a client tell me that last week. She's like, I think you're like a therapist for me. I was like, I'm definitely not that. But I think we talk so much in depth and get so personal about things that, at least for my clients, never talked about with anybody else. So being able to really listen, understand, have that empathetic ear, and then also provide solutions that make them feel more calm over time, I would say that that's pretty cool.
No, definitely. And I think us as lawyers listening, a lot of us have those same skill sets and are necessary, because you have to get the information from our client and help provide the strategy in a way that they're going to listen and want to move forward with it. So all very important. So how can people find you and ask more questions if they want to, and figure out, pick your brain?
Yeah, absolutely. So email is always really great. So I'm on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with me. Facebook. Is that it? I think so. Instagram soon to come. We're working on it. But just email at audreyjohnson@financialguide.com. Or just give me a call. My office line is 713-402-3830. I'm always happy to have a quick conversation just to understand where somebody is, what's going on in their mind, and then just to see if I can be a resource. I'm not always the right person, right? But if I'm not, typically I can help refer them over to somebody. Actually, really funny story. I had someone call me last week, and they were looking for an employment lawyer. And I was like, that's definitely not me, but I actually ended up referring them to an employment lawyer. And so that was kind of cool, because I, know one of my clients is one. But anyway, so yeah, that's how people can get in touch with me. So feel free to call me or email me. whatever you need, and happy to be of assistance if I can.
We'll put some links to how to find you. And so we basically covered briefly the importance of financial planning and the impact it has on our business planning, and just giving us more of that freedom to do what we want to do, and having risk analysis and being able to minimize that risk and being able to have more options to jump on opportunities, and how to protect our business and our assets for our family and for our future, and being able to control that time when the lever when we want to have our succession planning go into place. So thank you so much, Audrey. Great discussion. I'm sure we could go on for hours. And honestly, what I love talking about with you also is it helps put a lot of these terms that can seem foreign to us, like really in practical use, and sort of like make us, it all makes sense. And they're like, oh yeah. And it doesn't seem so out of reach. Well, thanks everyone for joining us on this insightful journey today. Your time and engagement has been the world to us. If you've enjoyed this episode and you want to continue the conversation, connect with us on Power Up Your Practice Facebook group. Make sure to subscribe, share it with a friend, post it somewhere, give us feedback, and keep powering up. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time. Thank you for tuning in to the Power Up Your Practice Law Practice Management podcast. I'm your host, Ruby Powers, and it's been a pleasure sharing this time with you. Join us next week for another episode where we'll continue to explore insightful strategies for success. Power Up Your Practice with us. See you next time.